Alright, we are back to reassemble this phone. I went ahead and put the pieces that we just discussed back onto the cable here. You can see that I've reassembled it just like it was when I took it out of the phone. Important part, you want to make sure this plastic and the power button is lined up correctly. Put the speaker portion back on in the center. There's a little tiny clear film cover here you want to make sure that you put back on if your new cable did not come with it. Not straight here. Let's make sure I get a little bit more straight. Alright, we're going to go ahead and peel the double-sided sticky tape off that and get it to stick back in. Now the trick is this little microphone, I think it's a proximity sensor, actually needs to fit back into this little slot here. It's actually probably the trickiest part of this entire installation, is getting it to fit back in the way that it should. You want it to be nice and flush so your cable goes in and your back fits on. Some sort of a flat tool will help you kind of press it back into the place. It does have like a little rubber grommet on the back of it that I haven't had a ton of luck getting to stay on. It doesn't seem too important as I haven't had any real issues with it not staying there. It usually has a little bit extra foam on the back of it, so if it does come up, it's not a gigantic deal, but I do try to get it to go in without having to take that off. The trickiest part of it is how small it actually is and where it fits back in. You want to get it nice and straight so your cable is seated. I'm going to pull it out and just kind of push that ground back on there. We'll try again. This is where the dental pick comes in really handy. Just because it's so easy to get into that tight space. You can use a flat tool like the iSesamo or a flathead screwdriver, but the dental pick truly is probably the best tool to get into this nice tight spot. You can always tell when I start thinking really hard as my head actually comes into the frame of the camera. Here we go. Make sure it gets nice and seated, and a little bit of the rubber's coming up. It's not a huge deal. You do want to remove it so it doesn't cover the screw portion that goes in right here. So just grab a pair of tweezers and pull off the part that's coming up, just like so. And it's looking pretty well seated in there. We're going to push down the speaker portion to make sure it gets a nice seal onto the housing here so it doesn't wobble around inside the phone. And this black portion where the power button goes in, you can see this little portion right here fits right above the speaker. And you're going to want to slide the housing for the power button. It goes in front of the black piece you just did. There's a little metal clip you can see that needs to go in front of. Make sure your power button is flush on the outside of the phone, and just press the plastic back into place, like so. Just test your power button, make sure that it is functioning. It is depressing. You can hear it kind of click. We're going to put a screw in to hold the housing together. It will come out just a little bit, not too big of a deal. The screw will actually hold the housing back into place. Alright. This can be slightly tricky just because it's a hard angle to get the screw back into. Just make sure that the screw holes line up nice and flush. Like I was saying, that power, you want to make sure that it's clipped in there. Alright, here comes our first screw. Excellent. a second screw for the power button housing. Alright, now putting these screws back in, you don't want to force them. It's not like putting on a car tire where it has to be extremely tight. You want to get them snug. The majority of them have locking glue on them, so they won't unscrew once you get them nice and tight into the slot. I'm going to put the LCD back on. The trick of putting the LCD on, you want to make sure both ribbon cables come through this upper slot here, and it's easier to kind of angle them in. Goes right in here, and you want to check to make sure that little plastic grommet we had with the power sensor cable is on here. Mine's a little unstraight, so I'm just going to switch it here. Alright, go ahead and put the power cables back into the angle, or sorry, the ribbon cables for the LCD. You want to pull them through. You don't want to bend them. One of them is actually very unflexible. It's almost like it's a thicker piece of wire that'll bend. Make sure it comes through. Once you do, you can see that there's a metal chip here that'll pop all the way through. It should be the same length when they both come through. Sometimes the home button here will be a little bit tricky. And you can slide your flat tool in to seat it correctly so you can push the LCD on. Alright, now it's nice and tight. We're just going to push the frame down a little bit here. We're going to put our 4 corner screws in, one in each corner of the phone to hold the LCD in nice and tight. Alright, here's our first LCD screw. Alright, like I was saying, they don't have to be extremely tight. You don't want to strip the screws, but get them nice and firm. You don't want your LCD to be loose, but you also want to be able to remove it again if you ever have to have any other repairs on your phone. Here's our second screw. Here is our third. This is the tricky slot here. Not too difficult. And there is our fourth screw. That puts our LCD back in. So check the ribbon cable, make sure it's nice and tight. We're going to put it down flush with the mid housing of the phone. And we're going to put our bottom speaker assembly back in. It just has some clips here on the front. You want to make sure fit back in to the mid frame of the phone. You can see that we're going to slide it out, put it front in, and then slide the back down. And that will usually get all of the front clips here to make that nice ground connection. I'm going to put a screw in the corner here, get it to hold back into place. Again, before you put that screw in, just make sure that all of those front clips are connected to the housing. Next thing we're going to do is put in our 6 side screws here. This is probably the trickiest part of the entire thing, is getting these screws and washers back into place. I find it easier to put the washer onto the screw portion first, and then put the screw on the tip of the screwdriver. It is much easier if you have a magnetic screwdriver to do this. And then I'll go ahead and screw it in on top. Trying to put the washer and the screw on at the same time is probably almost impossible unless you stick them together. So putting the washer on first and then putting the screw in next is the easiest way that I have found to do it. Everybody says that the power button's a pro fix, but I honestly think that changing the LCD is just as tricky when it comes to these screws. Alright, putting in our third screw, the last one on this side of the phone. going to put in the 3 on this other side. So it didn't seem very snug. Let me just double check it. There we go. Oh, the washer is pulling up a little bit right here. I'm going to unscrew it and get the washer to seat straight. And it is important to make sure that you do put these down nice and snug. You don't want your LCD to be loose, like I was saying, or anything to rattle around in the inside of your phone after a month after you put it back together. Alright, so we're putting our 4th screw in here, washer and screw. Getting very close to finishing this LCD reinstallation. And finally, moving on to our last one. Put the washer on and then put the screw in. Alright, here we go. We have the LCD back on, nice and snug. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put in our logic board. It is a little bit tricky to make sure it gets nice and a tight fit. There's the 3 ribbon cables on the right above the battery is the 2 upper LCD cables. You want to watch the lower cable and the antenna cable that comes with your bottom speaker portion. You need to make sure all 3 screw holes line up. Alright, we'll put in our first screw down here at the bottom. Well, maybe I can get it to stick on my screwdriver correctly. Alright. Put in the screw into the mid portion of the logic board. And then our upper standoff screws, we'll need to switch our bit to the flat head to put this screw back in. Alright, we're just going to go ahead and push these ribbon cables back on. This can be a little bit tricky to find the right seating point for these. You don't want to be aggressive with them, but again, just a nice firm pressure until they snap back into the right place. Put our camera back in, and you do that before we put on the 2 LCD connectors as it fits underneath them. And once we've done that, we can put the remaining 2 back on. And the upper portion of our phone is basically put back together. Put our lower cable back on. And just squish down the middle portion of the cable. And then our antenna, our lower coaxial antenna cable as well. I'm going to put our Wi-Fi antenna shield back on. And the remaining 5 screws that we took off. Now, it's going to be a little bit tricky. You want to be careful of this cable below. It does have a point where it does need to slide in to the kind of the mid frame of the phone here. But you also don't want to damage the ribbon cable that is right above it. So once you feel pretty comfortable that you're not doing any damage, you can line the remaining 5 holes up of the Wi-Fi antenna and go ahead and screw them in. Here's our second screw of 5. third. Fourth, it actually goes up here at the top. And our last one here that screws into that standoff screw we put in earlier. Alright, the Wi-Fi antenna is now attached. We're going to put our vibration module back in. There's one more screw to go on the other side. I need to get that slot line back up here. Here we go. Put our cover back over this bottom ribbon cable here as well, with 2 screws to go in. Here's the first. And the next is our battery. We're almost finished. And get it nice and snug back onto that glue. Alright, push that down. Make sure the battery connects, and we do have our little metal shell. This may come off when you pull your battery up, not a big deal. It may stick to the top of the battery either way. As long as you get it back on there, we'll put our screw that retains the battery back in. Alright, now that we have the battery power back onto the phone, let's double check the power button's actually functioning now. Fantastic. Apple logo shows up, so that means that it is starting up. We'll go ahead and put the back onto the phone. This back's being a little tricky. Alright, so test to make sure that it functions here real fast. And it does. Touchscreen works. Everything's looking good. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and like it. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. Subscribe to me if you want to see some upcoming videos. I have a MacBook Pro and another iPhone 4S for both CDMA and GSM versions. Thanks, guys.